wants to be with her mama.
And I would say what worked for us with Leela was, well, one thing was that I knew I was going back to office at 3 months, so I was a little bit motivated to set her schedule. But for her it was simple, and she took a dream feed at 11 o'clock at night, and then from pretty early on she was kind of able to sleep most of the way through the night till morning. And maybe it was that my pediatrician at the time gave me the encouragement that it was completely fine for her to go a couple hours. Because that's one thing that I sometimes see, is that the pediatrician sometimes forgets to say that you don't have to keep waking them up every 3 hours indefinitely.
Absolutely. I was told, come what may, wake your baby up every 3 hours and do not let the baby go hungry at night. Right?
I think the problem is that you get so much advice and so much conflicting advice that it's very difficult. Some people say wake the baby up, some people say baby will wake up when it's hungry, some people say, oh, my baby was sleeping through 8 hours when it was 6 weeks old, and lots of things. And when you're a first-time mother, you really don't know what is real, and you want to do your best. When it came to me, of course, I'm the youngest in my family. I've never had to change a diaper, I've never had to look after anyone or be responsible for anyone, but I'm also a control freak, so I want to do everything amazingly. So for me, my sleep went out the window. I understand, of course, that with everyone, sleep is key. Sleep is key for your appetite, for your health, for domestic harmony. But how do you achieve it with someone who is so small, they don't know day from night? How much should you feed them? Are you overfeeding them? I did have help because we have a nuclear family at home, so my in-laws, my mother not around, so we had a night nurse. I didn't know how much to trust people as well because you really don't know. So ultimately what ended up happening was, again, following the pediatrician, because my mother, like she said, in films as well, you must listen to your director. When it comes to mothering also, listen to your doctor. So I thought that seems sensible. And he also did say that it's possible after a certain age for the baby to sleep, and you can wake up the baby, you can do certain things, but they can also go a stretch of 6 hours quite soon, sooner than you think. And so we did try and achieve that, and we then tried to set up schedules. I've always felt routine and schedule are very important. When it comes to food and sleep, if you can get those down to some amount of regularity, then things become a little more predictable.
So obviously Kerry made no mistakes when sleep training her baby. We know that. But what do you think your biggest mistake was as a first-time mom when you were confused and like you said, you had advice from so many people? What was the biggest mistake now when you look back you think you made?
It's ongoing. I mean, I have one baby, she's now 2 years and 4 months. And I don't know sleep training for me is a different definition. And I think because I enjoy spending so much time with her, I've made many mistakes. I've read the book from cover to cover, and I've made many of those mistakes. A lot of things we do for our own convenience, but before I go into my mistakes, I want to say the things I'm proud of, if I'm allowed to. I did win the battle, which was that she needs to have a fixed bedtime, which should be at 7:30 every day, and even if that means that we don't get to say goodnight to her, that's all right. She has to come first, her needs have to come first. It's okay. And often that led to a little friction with extended family, even with my husband who'll be working and he say, why can't you keep her up a little bit later? But that has and continues to be a rule. We also set a certain time that we wanted her to wake up every morning, and then sort of did our whole schedule according to that. The thing that I wish that I'd worked on more was not letting her think that she has so much control over me. And unfortunately, now I'm starting to get it again. Like I say these words, Inaya, who's the boss? And she sort of looks at me as if, you're the boss? and then she listens. And if you kind of exude a sense of calmness and a sense of I've got this and I know what's best for you, I think they fall into line. I'm looking at Sky, who's here, who goes to school with, and I feel like she's going to tell her all of our secrets. But one of the things I continue to do is I do cuddle her a lot. And she doesn't go to sleep when her head hits the pillow. There's a whole ritual. It is extended. I disappear in that room for a while. I come out and months have passed, it feels like that. But now we've got it down to lights out, which she turns out the lights herself, the sense of control that she has. And then it's one long story that I have to narrate to her where she's the heroine. Then one short story, and then 2 songs, and then humming, and then patting, and then I can exit. So it is 25 minutes. I know it should be 10 minutes.
That's
It should,
my older daughter
right.
also. Yeah.
So and now it's too late. Maybe if I'd done this when she was younger, of turning out the lights and leaving her in a cot and walking away, then perhaps things would have been different. And maybe it's, and I know that again one of your chapters is about how to sleep train children who sleep in their own beds. And we're now moving to a bed this week. So I'm very interested in that chapter.
Yeah, yeah. It's a nice, it can be a really sweet transition.
It can.
Yes.
It can. And when they learn how to open doors.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't think that like what you're saying is, I don't think it's meant that we're not striving for efficiency. Like because I talk a lot in the book about like bedtime being a really pleasant part of the day where everyone feels cozy and connected. And then from there, the child kind of feels the safety to kind of let go. Like that letting go that has to happen during sleep. And so even what I do with my older daughter is also kind of drawn out because she's craving that so much. And I do cherish that time where it's like we're together, we're cuddling, we're reading, and she's definitely dragging it out, procrastinating. But we love, I think that's,
and it is now,
that's nice.
There was a time when, I think when also the children couldn't communicate, where there was a lot of crying, and it would be exhausting. And I wouldn't know what to do at times. I didn't know what she wanted. I didn't know if she was hungry or she'd had too much milk or what was going on. Now I feel a little bit of communication always helps, of course. But I do think, again, and a lot of people don't go by routine and schedule, especially in India. I know a lot of it becomes about it being child-led, and we do spoil our children in many ways, and they become the center of the universe. And then they know they're the center of the universe, and that's never a good thing.
Absolutely. So, exactly based on what Soha said, was one of my struggles, because my husband comes home from work at like 8:39, but Zephyr's bedtime is 8 o'clock, no matter what. Whether I'm home, not home, of course I love to be home for bedtime, but sometimes, for whatever reason, I can't be present. And it's always a struggle that, oh no, just keep the baby awake, it's just a baby, so what if he's awake later? But that's the one thing I did right,
And
for
then
sure.
the more tired they get, they'll go to sleep
Oh
faster.
my God, yeah, no.
And I don't think anybody who's had to actually put a baby to bed has said that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you said something in your book about how bedtime can be this lovely, cozy experience versus being this dramatic struggle. Dramatic struggle is the word you use. It is not necessarily a dramatic struggle with us, but it's a very, very, yours is 25 minutes, mine is about 45 minutes. And I'm trying to not repeat the same thing with my infant right now, because I've learned the hard way. So, what is your best time, what's your most special bedtime routine? Like, what do you think is like the most important thing right before bedtime?
So since I have the 2 kids, they both need what they need, right? So we do dinner, bath, and then we do books with Rumi. And then Rumi gets snuggle time, which is a very specific, like it's a 3, I don't know, it just works, So she gets her like 3 minutes of snuggle time, and then she's good. And so she's off. She's the easy one.
She's supposed to sleep?
She wants her socks on, and
Oh,
then she's
Kerry.
sleeping. Yeah. And then sometimes the house is still noisy, and she's still sleeping. So she's definitely the
Oh,
easy one.
Kerry.
I know, but I know. But then there's Leela, who's older, and so she's staying up a bit later. So after Rumi is kind of done, I go in with Leela and we read for a while. And I'm happy to read with her. I think it's it's a good way for us to connect, and I actually don't really mind that it's a whole chunk of time. Like, it doesn't feel painful at all. And then I would say maybe is where it gets a little like tough love, of kind of like, okay, I'm done with my bit, and even if you're not asleep yet, I've done my part of putting you to bed. So then I'll kind of step out, and she wants to come out once. So that also we feel is quite reasonable. She comes out once and then I bring her back to bed and then she can settle.
Basically, all of us have to read this book. We have to figure this out. Soha, what's your favorite bedtime routine?
And I actually do enjoy bedtime with Inaya, and it's just alone time also. And of course, you set the setting, so we try and keep the rest of the house as quiet as possible, which is easy because there's really no one there, and everyone is terrified of me. But what generally happens is there's dinner and bath, of course, and then at 8 o'clock now. 7:30 was a while ago.
Yeah.
Now it's 8:30.
Yeah,
It's 8:30 now, but 8 o'clock we start. So 8 o'clock, I'll say now, and I'll indicate that it's dark outside. So now she understands that, okay, the sun has gone to bed, and now it's time for you to go to bed as well. When we travel, it's going to be difficult. We go to England in the summer and the sun's out. I haven't thought ahead there. But at the moment, that works. And so she's understood it's dark, it's time to sleep. Now she turns off the light herself, so she finds that exciting. And I think when the room becomes dark, it lulls you into a state of sleep. Anyway, we've talked in your book about artificial light, and the less exposure you have to artificial light, the better it is closer to bedtime. Of course, screen time as well. So then after that, we've already read the books before the lights go off, of course, but she likes hearing stories. She does sit in my lap. Also, we have a very deep cot, and I cannot reach into the cot to tap her and pat her, so don't follow me, follow Kerry. We have a sofa, and she sort of lies on the sofa with her head on my lap, and I tell her a long story, and then sometimes if I miss a bit, she's paying attention. Then I tell her a very short story, and then we sing 3 songs. And it's generally the same songs because I think she likes the routine, and then she'll say, "Mama, no more singing." I think she's tired as opposed to objecting to my singing. And then it's sort of humming, and then I'll sort of, she falls asleep on me, terrible, falls asleep on me, but sort of, she's more on the sofa than on me. She'll be entirely on the sofa. And then I pick her up, and then it's a balancing act of putting her into the cot and not falling into the cot with her. And then it's all right. And then she does self-soothe through the night. And I've taught her as well that, if you wake up in the night, you know how to adjust the blanket, you know if you're hot and cold. If you need something, then, you can, of course, call for something if you need it. But, sometimes it's all right. Just close your eyes and go back. See, they come up with very inventive excuses, though.
Yes.
And some things you don't know, like my tummy is hurting. Do I take her seriously or not? My eyes are burning. There's lots of things.
But based on what you said, Kerry, we actually want to hear from you. What is the significance of, how is it a negative, situation when you do allow the baby to get a lot of artificial light post-sunset before they sleep?
So we do a similar thing. The kids definitely have that association that when it's dark, that means bedtime. So basically what we do is when it starts to get dark, I mention that. Look, it's starting to get dark. And then when the sun sets outside, we really try to dim the lights inside as well. So we're pulling curtains, we're turning off the bright overhead lights. And it does matter because any exposure to artificial light after sunset will interrupt the production of melatonin, the sleep hormone, and that will make it harder for babies to fall asleep. So this is one of the really simple things that I make everyone do, and I feel that one change alone takes so much of the struggle away at bedtime. Not all of it, but it helps. It really does help.
So, I'm a big believer of my baby, my rules, and like everyone else's opinion really doesn't matter. But of course, there's a lot of people that live within joint families, and they've got family pressure, this is how you should do it. Everyone has an opinion, right? Every single person has an opinion, family or not. So how do you tackle those? Like, what is your advice to all the moms out there? How do you stand by what you believe is right based on the research you've done? It's your child. How do you, what do you do? How do you stand up to that?
So on my side, we're quite far away from our family, so I actually haven't had to deal with it too much. Definitely in the beginning, we were clear with our boundaries about what time we were coming, what time we were leaving, and that the baby's schedule did come first. We did miss some events in the beginning, like in those first couple of months where they need to sleep so much. And everyone kind of was quite understanding. We saw right away as new parents that if we kept the baby up too late, it just backfired terribly. As far as families that I work with here, I do help people a lot with some of that boundary setting and advocating for themselves. And I find the best way to do it is with like a little bit of science, like a little bit of sleep science. And then when that's kind of presented to other family members or in-laws, that they really understand. Like I worked with a family that the grandparents were taking the baby to the park in the evening, which was so sweet of them. And we wanted that to happen, but they were just keeping the baby for too long. And the baby was coming home and howling in the evenings and having meltdowns just from being overtired. So I wanted them to still go to the park, but for a little less time. And we were able to really show them like how to see the sleep cues, and it made all the difference for that baby.
Could you come to my house, Kerry? Please.
I will.
Can I keep you with me for a week? Okay, but like, you know, you're from the States and then you live here now, and I'm sure that there's massive cultural differences in the way people sleep train or put their babies to sleep in India versus, you know, America. So what are the major things? I'm sure there's lots of things here that blow your mind.
So I only really know my specific situation, and at this point I've been a mom in India for longer than I was in New York. But one thing that happened for us in New York was it was this small Manhattan apartment. So there was no space, even if we wanted to bring in help, for any helper to be. And there was no space like for my mom to come and stay with us. So it was really just us. What I find here when I'm working with families here is that there's generally more sets of hands to pass the baby around, whether it's from help or from family members. And so what ends up happening is if the baby is not sleeping, and there's more people to kind of share the burden of that, which has, you know, its pluses and minuses.
Okay. Soha, before we ask Kerry, you tell me, what are your thoughts on co-sleeping, which a lot of families do, versus baby sleeps in her cot, her room?
See, my husband and I have talked about it a lot, and he's very into like, oh, I want Tanaya to come to our bed, and it's so nice to cuddle, and it's
Apparently
nice
both our husbands are exactly the same.
Yes, but I'm convinced that he's not being sensible at all, and he hasn't thought it through. And Inaya hasn't spent a night in our bed as yet. She's learned now how to open doors, and we're moving to a cot, so I don't know if I mean what's going to happen in the future. But she does have an association now that when it's bedtime, she goes to her room and she sleeps in her room. And she's asked for that. Like, even in the evening when we've been, all of us, the three of us have been in bed reading a book together. And, you know, he sneakily said, do you want to sleep in our bed? And I was like, don't ask that question. And she said, no, I want to go to my room. And I was just like, that's amazing. I don't know how long this is going to last. But, you know, we've been quite clear that, just because I can see the future, I just know that it's good for her to have her.
Oh, absolutely. I just tell Karan, I'm like, you know, you want to go to his room and sleep, do it. He's
also,
not
otherwise, I told him, I said, otherwise we all have to go to bed at 8 o'clock. Are you ready to do that?
Yeah.
And then wake up at 6 o'clock. And I mean, I don't want her to become us.
Yeah.
She's a baby, she's not us. She has to have her own schedule. She needs certain things that we don't need. And so if you can, I understand that a lot of people don't have the ability to have two sets of rooms. That's a different matter.
Absolutely.
But I mean, you can't say because I want to cuddle.
Yeah, that's correct. So like, yeah. You know, he'll be like, oh, they're only tiny for such a little time, and I want to snuggle with him, and he'll be off to university. I'm like, dude, relax. You know, but I've been very good with having him in his own cot from day one, and then having her in her cot. But then she's not alone because now it's both of them in one room. We'll get to that later. But what are your thoughts as an expert on what is advisable if you have the ability to have two rooms?
Okay, right. Because I work with a lot of families that the baby has to be in the room with the parents, for sure. And we do work with that. One of the things I say in that case is please be realistic and aware that whatever noise noises you're making, coughing, sneezing, snoring, whispering, tiptoeing, the baby can hear you. So I'm always recommending to use a white noise machine in a room sharing situation. I mostly recommend it for all babies because it is helpful, but definitely with sharing the same room. I think it's really helpful to kind of drown out some noises. As far as should the baby sleep independently? Well, I do think it kind of comes back to what you're saying, Soha, that adults need 7 to 8 hours of sleep, and we're lucky if we get that. And then kids need the 11 to 12